I'm curious if you could share, because when you were talking about true authentic self as the very first idea, you were talking about being real, raw, authentic, and sharing vulnerable stories, even when you quote unquote failed, you said.
Yeah.
And I think that one of those stories would be a good example to the listener who's hearing it, but not sure if they're going to be oversharing or if they're crossing a line. So it's perhaps the listeners thinking like, well, how do I do that? Like, how do I do that and not go too far? So Alex, like, what's one story you shared on your real estate podcast?
Yeah.
That you thought was one that really helped you to be true and authentic and have your listeners.
I have a couple that come to mind. I'll start with the most recent one, and if you'd like, I can share even one that was even much more personal. But in 2020, well, let me backtrack. In 2018, 2019, the real estate business was no longer giving me a sense of joy and fulfillment. And mind you, I got started in real estate in 2005. It's provided a great lifestyle. I enjoy real estate as a vehicle, but it's not the end all be all for me. I'm not passionate about real estate investing. And here I am, I host a podcast about real estate and lifestyle design and personal development. And I was struggling a little bit with my identity. And I was like, hey, if I unwind this big operation that I had built here in South Florida, what would people think of me? Would people not think I'm credible? Like my inner critic started to like really pop up. And 2019, I didn't make any moves. 2020 came around and I knew I was going to, at some point that year, exit the business. And then obviously we know what happened March of 2020 with COVID. And that really just accelerated the process. And I was struggling with, do I want to share and reveal the backstory, like how I ultimately came to the decision after 15, 16 years of being in real estate to unwind this wholesaling operation I built. And I remember I finally decided, you know what, I'm just going to kind of share all. And it was, to this day, I think it's one of the most downloaded shows I've had, but I just kind of opened my heart, man. And I just shared that, hey, I'm struggling with a little bit of identity crisis. And I was very reluctant to share. And this is me speaking to the audience and to the podcast listener. I said, I was struggling with, should I even talk about this? But I kind of just spilled all. And I had so many people, Adam. When I say so many people, I can probably, 30 to 50 people just personally reach out to me, and countless of messages about, man, I can so relate to that story. I've been feeling the same thing. And I just felt like me opening my heart and sharing what was on it connected me more to people, and people could relate and understand. And so I think if anybody is listening who is thinking of starting a show or who's doing a show, if they think vulnerability is a weakness, I would push back and challenge that. I actually believe it's a strength. And so that's something that if there's something that has happened to you, it's a part of your story. And so it doesn't define you. It's just a part of your story. So share it with people because they could benefit from it. Really quick, the other one was that back in 2009, 10, I considered filing bankruptcy. And that's a really long story, but I trusted the wrong person. That's my fault, not theirs. My taxes for 4 years weren't filed, and I was facing a pretty big IRS bill. And I shared that on the podcast. And very similarly, I had a lot of people reach out and say, man, I appreciate you kind of sharing something so personal. Fortunately, I decided not to, and I paid back every cent, and I've grown so much as a result of going through that experience and then sharing that on the podcast.
Yeah. Not to take over your interview, because I definitely want to highlight you, but I have a personal experience on this where something was really, really scary for me to share on my show, because we had raised money for a deal. We used to do syndication more.
Right.
We still have a couple of them now. But we were raising money for a syndication. We got all the money and we were about to make a couple $100,000. And because there's something called an acquisition fee, not that we're going to get into it with today, but we were about to make a couple $100,000, 215. And then we found out that somebody on the general partnership had a securities violation. And so we exited the deal, and I felt so stupid. I felt so embarrassed. I felt like I should have caught that way sooner. And the only reason that I shared is just as a learning lesson for people that, hey, just watch out, because I almost got scammed here. Yeah. And we had already had all the money that we were going to partner, co-GP is what they call it. And we were going to partner in this deal. And like, I just said, I guess my credibility is gone. I guess my credibility is out the window, but hey, this is a good lesson to share on the podcast. And so I'll just go ahead and share it. And I was really surprised. Like you mentioned, you had 30 plus people like reach out to you after you shared something. I got more surprised because more people wanted to place money with us after they found out that we almost messed up. And I was just like, how did that exactly work out that way? But I love that you said vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. And I think that other people find it that way as well.